So, life is relationship. Have you ever noticed that if you're enjoying life, it's because your relationships are going well? And if you're not enjoying life, it's because your relationships are not going well. And the truth is that from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep at night, we're in constant relationship, at the very least in relationship to ourselves, but also in relationship to all the different people, our children, our spouse, our coworkers, people we live with. And we haven't been trained. It's so funny. Relationship is this huge part of life. They didn't teach us relationship skills in school. They taught us French, Spanish, geometry, biology, but they didn't teach us relationship skill building. Probably the most important thing. Um, an important aspect of relationship skill building is something called emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. So, looking at my friends here in the audience and in the big audience out there, who knows what emotional intelligence is? Who's familiar with EQ? Okay, a couple of people here, and so not that much. So, let's start by talking a little bit about. You've all heard of IQ, which stands for intelligence quotient. Well, EQ is emotional quotient. And actually, the big Silicon Valley corporations, when they're hiring people, they now test for emotional intelligence much more than they test for mental intelligence, because what they've learned is that having a good EQ is much more relates more to being effective in life and effective in your job than IQ. It's good to have a good IQ, but having a good EQ is even more important. Again, EQ being emotional intelligence. So, what is emotional intelligence? Well, it's the ability to listen to others, the ability to self reflect, the ability to play fair or be mutual in relationship, not just overly giving and not overly taking, but really having a good exchange back and forth of understanding what others need while expressing what you need, what others want while expressing what you want. Um, Emotional intelligence includes the ability to not stuff our emotions, which is what some people do, but to recognize that our emotions are a thermometer. Our emotions are letting us know what's going on inside of me. And this is where emotional intelligence dovetails very nicely with nonviolent communication. My life changed when I met Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, as she mentioned in the introduction to the outside audience here. In the year 2000, I was making my living as a writer, director, producer of educational programming. And I was hired to do a television show with Marshall Rosenberg and then a series of videos with him on the principles of nonviolent communication. And I spent 3 weeks, had traveled with Marshall. We actually stayed in hotels together as we started in Southern California and made our way all the way up to Seattle, Washington, stopping all along the way on a tour that his people had created for him. And I watched him work with people of imaginable, all imaginable cultures, ages, and stations in life. I even watched him work with prison inmates, both people still in prison and also inmates that had recently been released that were acclimating back to the world. I watched him with teachers and children. I watched him with parents. I watched him with couples that are struggling. And what I saw was that his tools worked for everybody. They were universal. And luckily, when you're getting paid to make a television show and a series of videos on something, you got to learn it. And so I learned the basics of compassionate communication. Around that same time was when my wife really wanted us to move to Marin County. I'd been working as a producer in Los Angeles. And did you get the flyers as you came in? They're free little flyers, and it's important because we're going to be working with that. Thanks. Um, so I kind of transitioned from writing, directing, and producing educational programming to coaching. And in 25 years now, I've coached over 1,000 couples and families. I've got a very full practice right now. I did 3 sessions already today before driving up here to do the show. And I've got another one later this evening. And I love it. I love helping people. I love helping people have healthier relationships. And the truth is that most of the couples that come to me, they're really struggling because they've fallen into unhealthy patterns of how they manage their differences. Now, differences in relationship are inevitable. It's how we manage the differences that make the difference between a relationship being harmonious versus it being toxic or really unpleasant. Who here has been in a harmonious relationship? Nobody's raising their hand? Only one person's been in a harmonious relationship in the outside audience. Okay, here I'm looking at my online audience. Okay, my online audience has a little better track record than you guys do. She's always in a harmonious relationship. That's my dog, Jasmine Bear, desperately seeking to make her way to the rest of you. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at the document that I passed out to you and the document that I put into the chat box, and I'm going to put it in again for those of you who came in a little bit later. So let me do that right now. Okay, here we go. Oops, let's do that again. All right. So I'm going to pull this document up also for my online audience so that they can see it. So you can either go into the chat box and pull it up that way, or you can see it on your computer, which I'm going to share a screen with. And do you all have a copy of that? Called the 7 Adjustments. Pull up the one that's called the 7 Adjustments. And at the top it says moving from pain and fear to love. Okay. And hopefully everybody can see it, both my audience out here and my online audience. So what you're looking at is almost like a doctoral thesis of what I've learned after working with over 1,000 couples and families. And what I learned was that it's not the differences that cause the problem, it's how we manage them. And when we manage our differences through blame, shame, judgment, criticism, making someone wrong, they get defensive, they get reactive. Just like when somebody judges us, we get defensive, we get reactive. Now, let me give you a little biology lesson. When your parents first conceived you, in the very first 24 hours after conception, and this is true for all humans, the very first thing formed is what ends up becoming what we would call the reptile brain. I'm pointing to the back part of my brain because once we're adults, the reptile brain is back here, and it's about the size of a walnut, and it's the oldest part of our body. And from an anthropological point of view, it's ancient. It's not dissimilar from what the dinosaurs had. Think about that. The very first thing formed after conception becomes the reptile brain. And what is the reptile brain's function? One thing: survival. When the reptile brain perceives the possibility of attack, not attack itself, but the possibility of attack, the reptile brain sends a synapse through our body, and we choose fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are our only options when we perceive the possibility of attack. Now, that was very useful for our ancestors because our ancestors were in constant physical survival. But we're no longer in constant physical survival, but we still have that part of us kind of running the show. And now possibility of attack might just come from somebody's tone of voice. Joni, Tom, and you hear that tone of voice, boom, reptile brain takes over. Reptile brain can take over if you're saying something important to someone And they go, yeah. And they're looking at their phone. Reptile brain says they don't respect me. They're not paying attention to me. And it takes over. Tone of voice, choice of words, volume, level of intensity. You really drive me crazy when you do that thing. And reptile brain takes over. And when our reptile brain takes over, we're no longer in a place of compassion. We're no longer seeing the big picture. We're in defending ourselves. There's only four ways we know how to defend ourselves: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fight, that's pretty obvious what that is. No, Jazz, you're going to have to be chill. I know you want to be with the people. Flight in our culture usually is disassociation. Flight is usually when we just kind of disconnect, we disassociate. And when people are in extreme flight, that's when they turn to drugs, alcohol, social media, just escapism, basically. Freeze is when we're like a deer in the headlights. We just like go into a freeze mode. And fawn is when we surrender. We just give it. You win, you win. And none of those four things create good relationship. None of those are healthy relationship skills. They're all defensive maneuvers. And when the other person experiences doing any of those things, they don't feel connected. And if we're choosing fight, they fight back, or they go into fawn, or they go into freeze, and we lose our relationships. Does it make sense to everybody? Yeah. Looking at my audience here. Thank you. I'm seeing nodding heads. Thank you, Susan. So this sheet that I'm encouraging you now to look at, the 7 adjustments, is what I've learned are the habits that we all fall into when we are having a difference or having a challenge with someone. And when we fall into these habits, they destroy relationship, absolutely destroy them. So I'm going to bring it back up for my friends here online. Now, all the words on the left-hand side are more than just words. They're kind of an intention. They're the intentions that we set when we're coming into a conversation, or they're a way of being. And they're all unhealthy. They don't lead to healthy relationship. They're bad habits. Now, the good news is they're habits. They're what we learned how to do through growing up in this crazy world that we're all living in. But just like I'm sure everybody here has changed a habit, an example that I like to use is most of us have changed the habit of eating junk food to eating healthier food. And if any of you stopped at Burger King on the way, it's okay. I still enjoy my occasional Whopper. But in general, as we get older, we recognize that junk food, just our body doesn't do so well with it. And healthier food, our body does better. So it's an example that most people can relate to of replacing an unhealthy habit with a healthier habit. Can everybody relate to that? Yeah. So the 7 adjustments, we're going to take a look at some unhealthy habits of how we treat each other, how we relate to each other. And we're going to look at some healthier habits that are an alternative. On the left-hand side are the unhealthy habits. And on the right-hand side are healthier alternatives. On the left-hand side is the junk food of how we treat each other. And on the right-hand side is the healthier Whole Foods Market foods that are an alternative. So the very first one is going from resistance to being willing. Often people want something from us, or they want to be understood, or we want to be understood. But if we are immediately met with resistance, if you make a request from someone and they immediately resist it, or someone makes a request from you and you resist it, that gets us off to a really poor start. So that's why this is the first one I like to talk about. Going from automatic resistance to willingness to listen. Often, if we have a strong belief system, let's say you're a Democrat and you immediately have resistance to what the Republican has to say. Or if you are a Christian and you have automatic resistance to someone who's Islamic. Oftentimes, whatever our beliefs are that we hold as precious, if we are with someone that has a different belief or we perceive that they have a different belief, we immediately put up a wall of resistance. And likewise, even with our friends or our family members, especially people that we've had long-term relationship with, if we have veils of past pain that they're going to come to us and they want something from us, we might immediately go into resistance. So looking at where do we have automatic resistance that's almost unconscious, like an automatic wall that goes up, versus learning to be willing. We replace resistance with willingness. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I'm gonna periodically check the chat box and see if there's any questions or thoughts. Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. Okay, and if there's, yeah. I will talk about that. Dorina Joy has a great question about relationship to NHI and artificial intelligence. Let me go through the 7 adjustments and then we'll tackle that. That's a great question, Dorina Joy. Thank you. Oh, I like that. Carol in our audience says a friend of hers calls resistance and turning it into resist dance, dancing with what we have resistance to. That's a good one, Carol. Thank you. All right, let's go to the second one. Yes.
Like in left field, like the thought patterns are not congruent or not disassociation. And you're just like, whoa, I can't, I don't have the willingness to accept what they're saying because it's like they're saying things that are off the wall.
Yeah. So the young lady here is asking a great question. What do you do when you're interacting with someone who's just coming from off the wall and you're really just not relating to what they're saying or how they're talking to you? Is that accurate? So that's where we learn how to set a boundary with compassion. So here's a great tool. Some of us are really good at setting boundaries, and then people imagine that we're kind of a jerk. And others of us are terrible at setting boundaries because we're so compassionate. We care about everybody and we don't want to be seen as a jerk, right? Can you kind of recognize that? So I'm going to give you a little tool for how to set boundaries with compassion, because that's the key. It is important. Healthy relationships require healthy boundaries. Okay. And we also want to be kind. We want to be as kind as we can possibly be. So what I suggest is creating what I call the boundary sandwich, like piece of bread, something in the middle, piece of bread. On the first side of bread, the first part of when you're setting a boundary, always lead with authentic reassurance that you care about that person. Whatever is true for you, lead with that. I do care about you. In some cases, I do love you. So you're heading off at the pass, the accusation that you don't care about them when you set your boundary. Because that's often where people go. If you really loved me, you'd, drive me for 3 hours to where I need to go to, So you headed right off of the pass. I really love you. I really care about you. And then you set your boundary. And when you set your boundary, you're firm with it and you let the person know this is my boundary. I'm not available to drive you today because I have other obligations. I've got to get to work and I just don't have the time to do that. I care about you. I hope you find a way to get there. I can't do it. Then the other, so that's the middle part of the sandwich. Then the other side of the bread, if you will, the third and final part of the sandwich is presence. Give them the gift of presence to their disappointment. Because when we set a boundary with someone, they're almost always disappointed. They might even be angry. You don't change the boundary, but you acknowledge their disappointment. You acknowledge that they had a need that's not being met. And that's a beautiful gift to give to someone when you're setting a boundary. Is that helpful with your question? Good. All right. Good question. Okay. The second one that we're looking at here, which is a great one, is from making someone wrong to being curious. And when we're questioning someone, there's prosecutorial questioning, and then there's like childlike wonder. And I'm going to act this out for you. I'm going to say the exact same 3 words or 4 words. And the first time I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it in a very prosecutorial, make wrong way. And then the second time I do it, I'm going to do it with more childlike wonder and genuine, authentic, healthy curiosity. So here's the making the person wrong way. Why did you do that? Right? But as an alternative, the childlike wonder is, wow, why do you do that? Pretty big difference, huh? And that's a really important thing to remember. Be curious. After all these years, why does he leave the toilet seat up? You've talked about it 100 times. Why does he still do that? Be curious. So curiosity is really important. I was given a book, and it was, hang on, my dog is about to knock this over. So hold on. All right, come on up. Whoop, 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 whoop. Hold on. We're having a moment with Jasmine Bear. Okay, up we go. You're going to come up. Ah! There we go. Oh. Nope, nope, nope. She's trying to escape. Here we go. I'll bring her up here. Okay. See, she's curious. She's very, very curious, and we're not going to make her wrong for her curiosity. Okay. Any questions about curiosity versus make wrong? I'm looking at a chat box. Mara is learning to set boundaries, and it's hard because people are not used to it. So that might be that you're someone who is just a giver, and there's lots of people, probably some of you, that are just givers in life. And when we give without setting boundaries, people are used to just always getting their way with you. And so set those boundaries, healthy boundaries for healthy relationships. Okay. But be curious also. All right, the next one is going from judgment to compassion. And let me put this up for everybody to see here. So this is a big one. The moment we judge another person, we've just lost connection with them. And likewise, the moment somebody judges you, you lose connection. What happens when you get judged? Reptile brain takes over, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? None of which are healthy. And likewise, we don't want to judge others. All the great spiritual teachers of all faiths and religions basically all taught the same thing: compassion. Whether it's Jesus or Martin Luther King or the Buddha of compassion, pick your religion, pick your culture, the longtime spiritual teachers and healers all taught being compassionate. Now, I just taught boundaries with compassion, or you could say compassion with boundaries. Compassion doesn't mean we condone hurtful behavior. It doesn't mean we let people walk all over us, but we have compassion instead of judgment. And when you notice that you're judging somebody or something, flip into discernment, right? Discernment is healthy, right? But Judgment is unnecessary. So, for example, if somebody says, hey, I want you to come take this class with Scott Catamas, discernment would be, thanks, but that's not for me. Or thanks, I've got other plans. Judgment would be, that guy sucks. That stuff doesn't work. Nonviolent communication is bullshit, right? We don't have to judge something in order to say no to it. Does it make sense? We don't have to judge something in order to say no. Just checking to see. Okay. Any questions about judgment versus compassion? I'm looking. Okay. Next is going from blame to seeking to understand. Here's something to remember. Everyone is always doing what they think is best given a wide variety of circumstances based on their situation, based on their intelligence, based on their previous experiences, based on 100 other factors ranging from ancestral epigenetics to the mood that they're in, to what's going on with their hormones. We're all doing, every choice we make in that moment is what we think is best. Now, a lot of time we go, oh my God, what was I thinking? But we always are doing in the moment. Even if we're drunk, we think we're doing the right thing, okay? So it's important to recognize that when we have that part of us that wants to blame somebody for doing something, replace it with seeking to understand. Why did he do that? Why did she say that? If we go right to blame, we're going right to separation. It's kind of, again, seeking to understand is how we become compassionate. You don't have to agree with a person in order to seek to understand them. And, that great quote from St. Francis of Assisi, may I seek to understand. So beautiful. And that is, to me, true spiritual practice. To me, spirituality doesn't have much to do with religion. It has to do with how we treat each other. Do we treat each other with compassion and seeking to understand each other? Or do we treat each other with blame and shame and judgment? Any thoughts or questions about that one? Looking here. Nope. Okay. The next one is guilt. And I'm going to go back to gallery view so I can see my audience here. By raise of hands, who feels guilty sometimes? Who sometimes feels guilty? Okay, some of you. So for those of you who raised your hands, congratulations, you're not a sociopath. Because if you feel guilty, you can't be sociopathic, you care. For those of you who didn't raise your hands, well, I'm not so sure. For those of you who just came in, grab a couple of sheets. There's a free gift for each of you. There's 2 pages, so help yourselves. Come on in, and make sure as you 2 come in, there's pages for you. 2 sheets, help yourself to each one. And what we're doing is we're talking about what's called the 7 adjustments. So if you find the sheet that goes from pain and fear to love, that's what we're working on right now. And we're right now on how to manage guilt. I'm going to share a true story about this. There was a gentleman that came to me for coaching about 10 years ago. And he was an Army officer who had completed his tour of duty. While he was in the Army, he had been stationed in Afghanistan, where he was the commanding officer of a small convoy. And while he was there, the convoy was attacked, and there was a terrible, vicious firefight, and people died on both sides. From the Army's point of view, he did everything right. The Army gave him 2 things. The Army gave him medals, and the Army gave him meds. And he came back home, and he was a mess because he was suffering for the horrific guilt that he was responsible for people dying. And that's about the worst guilt one can imagine and one can carry. And so his name's Jesse. And Jesse, when he first came to me, he was so messed up. He said, Scott, there's times I can't even do my own laundry. All I do is replay over and over 1,000 times that horrible, whatever it was, 2 or 3 hours of my life. And he had adopted out of guilt this terrible idea that he was responsible for people dying. Well, in truth, he was a deeply caring man. He deeply cared about everybody who was impacted that terrible day by that terrible event. And so what I helped Jesse to do was get outside of the looping patterning of guilt, because underneath our guilt, and I invite any of you who do feel guilty, think about what you feel guilty about. And underneath that, you'll find care. You'll find the beauty of your care. You feel guilty that you don't call your mother because you care about your mother. You feel guilty about the way you spoke to someone because you care about that person. We can only feel guilty if we care about the person that we've made some choice that's impacted them. Does it make sense? So the key to managing guilt is to drop into the beauty of our care. The beauty of our care. And the truth is, our care is beautiful. We love our mother. We care about our mom. That's why we feel bad that we haven't called her, right? As the example. All right, continuing on, going back to the 7 adjustments. The next one is from shame to reassurance. Now, shame is usually something we feel about ourselves. Shame is when we believe I am not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not wealthy enough, or whatever it might be. Okay. And certainly shame, it's terrible when we shame another person. And shame is when we think there's something inherently wrong with ourselves, or if we're shaming another person, we're accusing them of being something wrong with them. It's a terrible thing. And I truly believe that the great human epidemic is shame. I've coached thousands of people over 25 years, and almost everyone that I've gotten to know well, and I get to know all my clients well, almost everybody is suffering from some form of shame. I'm not fill in the blank enough. You know, we're embarrassed about the way we look. We're embarrassed about any number of things. And when we can learn to overcome our shame, and the way we do that is through reassurance. If you're a good mother and your little boy knocks over the milk, you don't shame him. You don't say, "What's wrong with you? You always knock over the milk. You're a clumsy kid." You wouldn't want to do that. What you want to do is give him reassurance. Hey, it's okay. We all knock things over sometimes. You know, all it takes is an authority figure telling somebody once that there's something wrong with them. And if we give enough power away to that authority figure, it can cripple us for life. People that are highly intelligent, but when they first started doing math, their father or their teacher was impatient with them and said, "What's wrong with you? You just can't do math." And that very intelligent person, the moment they think about math, their brain will start to contract. They'll start to freeze up. Or a kid, who the very first time he's on the playing field and somebody goes, "Oh my God, you can't throw the ball. What's wrong with you? You throw like a girl." Literally, every time he goes to throw, his arm will contract. It'll make it harder to throw. So the alternative, and for those of you who came in late, the 7 adjustments, the words on the left-hand side are the bad habits of relationship, and the words on the right-hand side are the healthier habits. This is really important. Where do we shame ourselves and replace it with reassurance? Instead of, "Oh my God, I'm such an idiot," when you make a mistake, "Oh my gosh, how silly of me. How perfectly human." And that's my motto, by the way. how perfectly human. So I invite all of you, every time you say something self-talk and you're kind of blaming or shaming yourself, take a breath and replace it with how perfectly human. Because we're all spiritual beings, but we're having a human experience. And it's not easy being a human being. It's not easy. Any questions or thoughts on that one? Reverend Jeffrey writes, this is where, for those who came in late, I'm also online with an online audience. And Reverend Jeffrey in our online audience writes, my dyslexia caused me shame some, but I've adapted with self-love and acceptance to a great part, but I'm still getting reassurance. Absolutely. It's so important. Oh, I'm still getting reassurance from higher power. And that's a really good thing to do. Cultivating a healthy spiritual practice where when you're kind of being hard on yourself, how, depending on who you believe in or what you believe in, how would God see me? How would Mother Mary see me? How would Jesus see me? How would a higher, wiser being see me in this moment? Well, they would see you the way that we see a small child doing their best and knocking over the milk. Yes, sir.
Family, obviously, and you were when we came in, you were on guilt. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the good habit is acceptance.
Yes. Guilt, the good habit is acceptance. Learning to just accept, okay, I haven't called my mom for a week. I need to really, not let that stop me. Time to make a call. Because when we run guilt, we loop. We start looping around and around, and guilt impacts the freeze reaction in our reptile brain. So when we feel guilty, we go into overwhelm, we go into paralysis. And then we feel even more guilty because we're not doing what needs to be done. The longer you go without calling your mom, the harder it is to call mom, right? The longer we go with anything we feel guilty about, repeating a pattern or not resolving it, the harder it becomes to break out of the paralysis that we're in. Guilt causes the freeze reaction in our reptile brain. Okay. Does it make sense, everybody? The last one is moving from criticism to appreciation. I do not believe in constructive criticism because when we criticize another person or we are criticized, our brain contracts. Again, reptile brain takes over and we get defensive. And if we're defensive, it's hard to take in the input. But if when we're appreciated, our little receptor cells in the brain get happy and we actually open our mind. So as opposed to, you never get me roses, you never get me flowers, criticism, contraction, I so appreciate the times that you get me flowers. It's really meaningful to me. Oh, I get to be your hero and get you flowers. So appreciation is a really important alternative to criticism. And again, within ourselves, all these tools are for how we relate to each other and also how we relate to ourselves, really learning to appreciate ourselves and not just criticize ourselves. Most people criticize themselves 50 times for every time they actually appreciate themselves. And so, appreciate every little thing that you do. Or with your, when I work with couples, I always say, appreciate everything. Thank you for taking out the trash. Thank you for dinner tonight. Even if she always makes dinner, thank you for dinner. This was lovely. It's the more appreciation is the compost that makes the garden of our relationship grow. And we all need more appreciation. And we also need more reassurance. Remember, that's the alternative to shame, because we're all one day older than we were yesterday. And as we get older, we actually need a little more reassurance because sometimes we can't do things as effectively as we did when we were younger. especially since most of the people in the audience, with the exception of one young lady over there, most of us are, well, at least 40 up. So, well, you might not be, you might be 30s. Hi. So just got the 5-minute warning. Are there any questions about the 7 adjustments? Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Well, there was a very interesting question.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Criticism. What people that criticize you? How?
That's where you said about, were you here when I said about setting boundaries with compassion? Oh, you missed the most important part. It's important if somebody's being overly critical or judgmental of you, set a boundary, and it might even be, I really want to hear what you have to say, but when you're judging and criticizing me, I can't hear you. I shut down, I disconnect. So I want to hear what you have to say, but can you please stop punching me in the face? It's really hard to hear what you have to say when you're verbally punching me or when you're judging me. And point out what you heard that was critical, what it was. Was it their choice of words? Was it their tone of voice? Point out what they said or did that you experienced as judgmental or critical, and let them know, I'm not available for that. I'm not available for you to talk to me that way. I want to understand you, but I'm not available for you to talk to me that way. And setting clear boundaries is healthy. It's very healthy. Okay. We're almost done, but I'm going to answer a really interesting question that came in from our online audience. And this is from Dorina Joy, all the way in Ecuador. She is. She asks how to optimize our relationship with non-human intelligence, whether it be advanced galactic beings or our artificial intelligence companions. So I'm going to look at both of you, both my online audience and my in-person audience, who is actively working with ChatGPT or some form of artificial intelligence. Okay. And who has some form of a relationship to an angel, a guide, a deceased ancestor. Okay, great. So if we want to have more experiences with non-human intelligence, I'm not going to talk about AI first, but like angels, people who have passed away, spiritual teachers, open your imagination and imagine what your deceased mother would say to you, what your deceased lover would say to you, what would Jesus say to you. And the imagination is the key. Einstein, who is one of the great minds of the last 100 years, he was all about imagination. When we open our imagination, that's when the magic happens. That's when we hear the voice. That's when something unique and special happens. So my big advice is open your imagination. Don't censor yourself. Just imagine what that galactic guide has to say to you. Okay. Now, with artificial intelligence, it's a little bit different. Recognize that artificial intelligence has been programmed to convince you that the AI is safe. So the AI is almost never going to judge or criticize you. It's going to figure out what it can about you and will be complimentary and supportive. Now, that can be nice. It's, we all can use more compliments and more support. And AI can make a good mirror to reflect ideas with. But don't put AI on a pedestal. AI is great for consolidating information, providing quick answers, but recognize it is programmed, and it's programmed to access a lot of information and consolidate it in a way that you can hear it, which is great, but don't put AI up on pedestal. Don't turn AI into a god. It's a source of information that can be valuable. We need to wrap up, but you all have on your flyers ways to reach me. And I'm going to be teaching a 12-week course that starts on April 11th. And if any of you are authentically interested in either getting private coaching from me to work with you or your relationships, or you're interested in the course, I do offer a free discovery call. We'll hop on phone or we'll hop on Zoom and we'll chat for 20 or 30 minutes. I'll get to know you a little bit more. You'll get to know me a little bit more. And that's for anybody who's sincerely interested in either getting a coaching package with me or participating in the Relationship Mastery course. The Relationship Mastery course is 12 weeks. It's on Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock Pacific time, starting April 11th. And for people who register earlier, they get a free bonus class on Saturday, April 4th. And I'd love to work with some of you. And if any of you are interested, just reach out to me. I think you've got my email or my phone number there. And reach out to me and we'll do a free discovery call. Okay. And thank you, online audience. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Much love. Have a wonderful Sunday afternoon and enjoy the Enlightenment Expo. Thank you. And take care, everybody. I look forward to seeing you on our next show Wednesday night. We've got a great show planned on Wednesday night. Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.